千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together.
Lao Tzu says, in order to weaken something, you should do the opposite. You should make it stronger. Now, with this, most people will look at this idea and say, what? That doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. It seems to be totally going against common sense. If I want to weaken something, why would I give it more strength? So it actually is not a paradox. Sometimes, authors who don't really know the Tao will take something they can't understand completely and call it a Tao paradox, or maybe something that's not meant to be understood. That's what they'll say. Sort of like a Zen paradox. However, usually all it really means is that they haven't figured out what it really means yet. So Tao came way before the Zen, and the lessons of the Tao, even when they're not obvious, even when they're not intuitively appealing, they really actually do work. So this can also work in real life, as I would like to illustrate by sharing a story with you. So the story is this one here. The name of the story is Weaken and Strengthen. As you listen to the story, I think you will find that an equally good title will be Strengthen and Weaken, with the sequence reversed. The image that you see here is a newscast, television newscast studio. So this is the anchor chair where the cameras will zoom in close to the news anchor to hear the news anchor report the news. So many of the stories that I share with everyone are from ancient origins. So this is an exception. This is a story in modern times about a reporter, an anchorman who is at a news station. So as our story opens, the latest ratings came in for the newscast. And the anchor, his name is Anthony, that newscast that he anchors, once again, ranks first. So this, of course, is cause for celebration, because once again, this anchor, Anthony, was the #1 news anchor among all the TV journalists. So, of course, Anthony the anchor was very popular. Not only was he popular, he had also developed quite a bit as a star, along with a star-sized ego. And that ego constantly brought him into conflict with others on set at the studio, including his boss. And his boss is the news director. So one clash that occurred recently between Anthony the anchor and his boss, the news director, was when the television company president had a son who graduated from college. So the news director, wishing to please his boss, the company president, sent a news reporting team to cover the graduation ceremony for the son. When the newsman returned with the story, Anthony, the anchor, refused to report it in his show. He refused because he felt that this was simply not a newsworthy event. And he stood his ground. He said, how can this be newsworthy? And if we think of this as newsworthy, then what about graduation ceremony from all the other colleges? Right? So we can't report this. So he made his point. And because of his star-sized prima donna ego, he didn't stop at just making the point. He also threw in a whole bunch of remarks, unflattering remarks about the news director, his boss, and the company president, his boss's boss. So, of course, other people heard about this and quickly spread it far and wide on the company grapevine. People love to dish dirt, and they caught on to this. So they repeated what he said throughout the organization. Now, this was, there was other clashes also, not just this one. There were times when his boss, the news director, wanted to de-emphasize some stories, not just report on something like a college graduation, but to hold on some of the stories without reporting it. But Anthony, the anchor, would insist on reporting them and would go against his boss and spend actually quite a bit of time on the air at the expense of other news items. And he would justify himself by saying that, well, people have a right to know. This is important. So this kind of insubordination happened so much that the president finally told the news director, you should just fire him. Just, I can't tolerate this kind of insubordination. I don't care how popular he is. Now, the news director said, no. Listen, have you ever seen the volume of fan mail that he gets? I'll tell you, if I fire him, there's going to be such an outcry. There's going to be protests. There's going to be a mail campaign to bring him back. There's going to be such unhappy viewers that I'm probably going to have to resign as well. So you won't just be getting rid of him, you're also going to be getting rid of me. So the company president backed off. Or did he? The next day, Anthony, the anchor, was called into the president's office. So he thought maybe he was in trouble, but he wasn't that worried because he was backed by his high popularity rating. He figured, well, I probably get a reprimand over the recent careless remarks that I made, but it's no big deal. As long as my ratings are at an all-time high, I can get away with it. I can challenge management. They can't do anything to me. They wouldn't dare. So the conversation in the president's office surprised him. The president said, Anthony, we've been talking about creating a new department for quite some time now. It's a department for news documentaries. You've been excited about this. You've been thinking about this for a very long time. And you're also the best we have. So I think it only makes sense that we create this department and have you take charge of it. So Anthony is like, what? This is amazing. So excitement overwhelmed Anthony because if all went well, he could even leverage the news documentaries into a news magazine show. He could not believe what he was hearing. He came in expecting reprimand, but his dream job just landed in his lap. So news of this also spread quickly throughout the entire news organization, and his co-workers could not believe it either. They were stunned. Now, one of them expressed actually admiration for the president. He said, you guys can see that the president didn't take Anthony's crap personally, right? He did not retaliate. He actually, instead of doing that, he's actually promoting Anthony to Anthony's dream job. That's some class, man. That shows that he's a real professional, doesn't let personal feelings get in the way. So actually express a lot of admiration for the big boss. So in the new department, Anthony's first assignment was to create a documentary, and the subject was about the economy of the Pacific Rim, something that he was passionate about for quite some time. So the news station sent him on a 3-month investigative journey throughout the Pacific Rim to gather information, to get the material to put together the eventual broadcast. So Anthony traveled in style. He was on a generous expense account. After 3 months, he came back with a lot of stuff. He kept super busy during all that time, the 3 months. So he came back with boxes full of research material, a ton of notes that he took, a ton of paragraphs that he took, and a lot of tape recordings that he took. He felt that he was ready to make a difference. He felt like he was ready for the next stage in his career. He wanted to show everyone what he could do. He couldn't wait. He was so eager. But then he ran into his first snag. In order to put together his program, the documentary, he had to get stock footage from the news department. You know, his narrative would talk about how the economy used to be, and then showing stock footage from a long time ago, and then how things are today. So the news director, his old boss, was not exactly all that eager to help him. He said, just follow company procedures, fill out the appropriate forms like everybody else does. We all have to follow the same process. This became an exercise in frustration for Anthony. The simplest request took a long time. And when the stock footage did show up, those film clips, either they weren't located, they could not be located, or they were unusable. And the ones that they couldn't find, some of them, Anthony was pretty sure, yeah, I saw them, I've seen them, they're there. So he suspected that maybe people were sabotaging him intentionally, either making things more difficult or not helping at all. But he was not able to prove anything. So several more months passed, and his feature documentary was still far from completion. This meant that there was the beginning of criticism from the board of directors. After all, he used to be their star anchor, so he was one of their highest salary earners. All that money, and for what? So the question from the board became more pointed. Like, we spent all this money, and what's the end result? Well, so far, nothing. So finally, the president called Anthony in again and delivered the bad news to Anthony. He said, your heart's in the right place, Anthony, but this is just not working out. It's not working out for you. It's not working out for us. The board has decided to dismantle your department. So we only just created it, but it hasn't produced anything. So the board doesn't feel like there's a reason for the department to continue on. So listen, Anthony, perhaps you should consider going back to reporting rather than doing documentaries. Now, Anthony, after months and months of frustration, has had it with the plan of creating the documentary. So he said, yeah, that's just fine. That's fine with me. He said, after all, you know, and everybody knows that anchoring the news is what I do best. I'm a proven performer, and I know that I can return to it and shine like I did before. So yeah, put me back on the anchor desk. I'm ready. The president said, no, we can't do that. We can't do that right away. When you left on your 3-month trip to collect material for the documentary, we had to promote another anchor. So the new anchor is actually doing quite well. The audience got used to him, and now they are giving us great ratings. Again, they're comparable to what you did before. So this means you're going to have to go back to field reporting, but just for now. When the opportunity comes up to promote you, talk to the news director, your old boss, going to be your boss again, and we'll see what he can do for you. So, checkmate. Anthony was stuck. He had nowhere to go. He didn't want to go back to field reporting. He had to quit. He knew the news director would never let him anchor again when he's got the choice of someone else who is much more compliant with his wishes. So he couldn't bear the thought of going back to being a field reporter because he used to be the star. He had to quit. There was no two ways about it. So news of his departure spread throughout the small world of newscasters. Because of the manner in which he left, under such a dark cloud of failure, he was unfortunately not in a position to pick and choose from many job offers for his next job, and he had a very tough time landing his next gig. The end. So that's a rather modern story about a news anchor. So what's it got to do with this particular chapter? Well, it turns out quite a bit. Part of it, I think, is obvious. We talked about pride goeth before the fall. So definitely, Anthony's ego got out of control, led to his downfall. He might have thought that he was protected by his popularity, but he was wrong. He might have thought of himself as being indispensable. Well, he was wrong about that too. So here's the Tao associated with the story. Let's think about the TV anchor's boss, and here I mean the president, who technically is the boss's boss. First of all, he expanded Anthony's ego by promoting him. He strengthened Anthony's position by placing him in charge of his own department for news documentaries. So this is exactly as we have just talked about, that to shrink something, you have to expand. To weaken something, you have to strengthen. So that's what he did. Now, by the end of the story, what we see is that Anthony's ego was much deflated by the events. He lost his position as the star anchor. He had to be feeling pretty horrible about the prospects of going back to field reporting. So his ego was deflated, his position was weakened. So we can tell, it's quite true from this particular story, that to shrink something or someone, first expand. To weaken something or someone, first strengthen. It really does work. And there's a little bit more to it. This whole idea is not just in the realm of careers, promotion, demotion, firing, losing a job, looking for a job, all that stuff. This whole idea of expanding and then shrinking, strengthening and then weakening turns out to be so incredibly common no matter where you look. So when we look at television, but not the newscast, but entertainment programs, there are many tropes that are used in television shows. What is a trope? It's a cliche, an overused formula, something that is repeated with variations again and again and again. So just as an example, the other day, I was talking to some friends and I said, well, imagine you are a modern woman living in the city. You are successful. You have a great job. You love your job. And you're so busy with your job that you don't have time for a social life. And then one day, you have to go back home, which is a small town. So you go back home only to discover that your high school flame is still single. At this point, my friends stopped me and said, wait a minute, we've seen that movie before. And I said, of course, I was describing a trope, a formula, something that is used over and over again. So there are many tropes like that. There's one particular one that bears upon our topic today. And that trope is called, gonna give them more energy. This is used all the time. As soon as I describe the overall pattern, you're gonna recognize it. In this pattern, we have a monster. The monster is on the loose, on a destructive rampage. So the good guys try to stop the monster. They blast at it, energy blast. But the monster shrugs them off, and it doesn't weaken with the blast. It actually seems to grow stronger with each blast. How can that be? How do we defeat the monsters? It's taking our best shots, and it's getting stronger. What to do? What to do? Well, I think you can guess, because you've seen this many times. Suddenly, the hero has an idea. We'll give it even more energy. And everybody is like, no, we can't do that. You're crazy. All of his teammates think it's crazy, but eventually he convinces them. He wins them over. They work together as a team against the monster, everybody pouring energy in. So the monster absorbs all that energy from all of them, seems to get even more powerful, seems to get even bigger, but soon realizes, no, there's too much to contain, can't take any more. So then the monster blows up. Once again, the good guys save the day. And you should be like, wait a minute, I've seen that. I've seen that cartoon or television show or movie. I've seen that quite a few times. That's a trope. And that's exactly why we're talking about this, because why do tropes, become a trope? It's because they are drawn from human experience. They're dramatic formulas that are often repeated with variations precisely because they're drawn from human experience. And so it means that we can see it not just in fiction, like television shows, cartoons, movies, or the story that we were just telling about the news anchor. And I remember the movie, The Incredible Hulk, directed by director Ang Lee, actually ended exactly the same way as what I just described to you. So sorry for the spoiler if you haven't seen that movie yet, but the point is, it's repeated so incredibly often because we have that in real life. We have examples in real life. Oftentimes, it can take the form of someone being promoted beyond his or her abilities, which causes problems for the organization and fellow employees. So in that example, the monster would be the bad manager. So the manager does well at a particular job, gets promoted, does well again, gets promoted again, and the promotion is the energy blast that causes the monster to grow bigger and bigger until the manager can no longer function at a competent level, promote high enough to a level where he can no longer be doing as well as he did before, and then he will then cause problems for the organization and fellow employees, or in the case of our pattern, the monster blows up. This is in fact a common occurrence. There's a book written about it called The Peter Principle by Dr. Lawrence J. Peter. He phrases it this way. It's actually the Tao he's talking about, but he phrases it for modern business. In a hierarchy, every employee tends to rise to his level of incompetence. So it's the expansion and strengthening of this employee who becomes a manager, and then middle manager, senior manager, etc., until he just can't cope anymore. So that's the reason why I say that the story is called Weaken and Strengthen, but it can just as easily go by the reverse title, Strengthen and Weaken, as you can see. So if you understand this whole idea, this concept, it's time to challenge yourself to make use of it, to make your life better. So we have seen that energy infusion causes destruction. Okay, that's one way to put it. Here's a challenge question, which I want to answer by the end of our time together today. Challenge question. Can you see how you would use this Tao teaching to strengthen yourself naturally without collapsing in failure? See, that's pretty useful, and that's there too. On the surface, this Tao appears to be talking about how you can bring something to ruin, destruction, and collapse. But the reverse is also true. You can use this Tao, if you understand it, if you really have figured it out, you can understand how to make it so that you will expand and strengthen without the failure part.
Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.